The rain hammered against the steel walls of the military compound at 2:17 a.m. when Staff Sergeant Maya Patel slipped into the weapons maintenance bay. The dim emergency lighting cast long shadows across the rows of tactical equipment, but Maya moved through the darkness like she owned every inch of the place. In her weathered hands, she carried a rifle that had been declared impossible to fix by 3 different weapons experts. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. The M4A1 had taken shrapnel damage during a rescue mission in hostile territory 3 weeks ago. The bolt assembly was cracked, the firing pin was bent beyond recognition, and the barrel had microfractures that made it dangerous to fire. Command had already ordered replacement parts, but those wouldn't arrive for another 2 weeks. The Navy SEALs who had carried this weapon needed it back in working condition within 48 hours for their next deployment. Maya set the rifle on the steel workbench and pulled out her toolkit. The worn leather case contained instruments that most people wouldn't recognize as standard military issue. Some she had crafted herself during her 15 years of service. Others had been gifts from mentors who had taught her that sometimes the impossible just needed a different approach. She began by completely stripping the weapon down to its basic components. Each piece was examined under the magnifying lamp, cataloged, and set aside. The damage was worse than she had initially thought. The bolt assembly wasn't just cracked, it was held together by little more than hope and good intentions. The firing pin looked like it had been through a blender. Most mechanics would have thrown their hands up and walked away. But Maya wasn't most mechanics. She had earned her reputation by fixing things that couldn't be fixed, by finding solutions where others saw only problems. Her fellow soldiers called her the miracle worker, though she preferred to think of herself as someone who simply refused to accept defeat. The first challenge was the bolt assembly. Standard protocol would be to order a replacement part, but Maya had learned long ago that standard protocol often meant leaving soldiers without their equipment when they needed it most. Instead, she pulled out a small welding torch and began the delicate process of rebuilding the damaged metal. The work required the steadiness of a surgeon and the patience of a saint. One wrong move could render the entire assembly useless. As she worked, Maya's mind drifted to the mission that had damaged this rifle. The SEALs had been tasked with extracting a captured intelligence officer from behind enemy lines. The operation had gone sideways when they encountered unexpected resistance. The rifle's owner, Petty Officer First Class James Mitchell, had used it to provide cover fire while his team evacuated wounded civilians. The weapon had saved lives even as it was being destroyed. The welding work took 3 hours. Maya's hands never trembled, never hesitated. She rebuilt the bolt assembly piece by piece, reinforcing weak points and improving on the original design. When she was finished, the part looked different from factory standard, but she knew it would be stronger and more reliable than anything that had come off an assembly line. The firing pin presented a different kind of challenge. The original was made from hardened steel that required specialized equipment to reshape. Equipment that wasn't available in the middle of the night in a standard maintenance bay. Maya studied the bent piece under her magnifying glass, calculating angles and stress points. Then she did something that would have made her instructors at weapons school either proud or horrified. She began hand-forging a replacement firing pin from scratch. Using a small anvil that she kept in her personal toolkit and a hammer that had belonged to her grandfather, Maya slowly shaped a new firing pin from a piece of high-grade steel. The rhythmic sound of metal on metal echoed through the empty bay as she worked by lamplight. Each strike was precise, calculated to gradually form the piece she needed. The work was exhausting. By 5:30 a.m., sweat dripped from her forehead despite the cool air in the maintenance bay. Her shoulders ached from hunching over the workbench, and her hands were stained with oil and metal filings. But the firing pin was taking shape, becoming exactly what she needed it to be. As dawn approached, Maya turned her attention to the most challenging problem, the microfractures in the barrel. These hairline cracks were invisible to the naked eye but potentially deadly. If the barrel failed during firing, it could seriously injure or kill the person using the weapon. Standard procedure would be to condemn the barrel and order a replacement. Maya had a different idea. She had learned a technique from an old gunsmith in Afghanistan, an ancient craftsman who had been repairing weapons since before Maya was born. The method involved using a combination of heat treatment and specialized compounds to actually strengthen the metal at the molecular level. It was risky, untested by military standards, and absolutely against regulations. It was also the only way to have this rifle ready in time. Maya spent the next 4 hours working on the barrel. The process required heating the metal to precise temperatures while applying a compound she had mixed herself from various chemicals in the maintenance bay. The timing had to be perfect, the temperature exact, or the entire barrel could be ruined. She worked with the focus of someone who understood that lives depended on getting this right. By 9:15 a.m., other personnel began arriving at the maintenance bay. Maya barely noticed them. She was deep in concentration, making final adjustments to the reassembled rifle. Every component had been tested, retested, and verified. The weapon was ready for its final evaluation. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb arrived at 10:30 a.m. for the scheduled inspection. He was a tall, stern man with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. Webb had commanded troops in 3 different combat zones and had no patience for excuses or substandard work. He was also the officer who would ultimately decide whether Maya's work met military standards. Webb approached the workbench where Maya stood beside the reassembled rifle. She had cleaned the weapon until it gleamed under the fluorescent lights, but she knew the real test would come when Webb examined the internal components. Her modifications were visible to anyone who knew what to look for, and she had no idea how he would react to her unconventional methods. The lieutenant colonel picked up the rifle and began his examination. His experienced hands moved over every surface, checking the action, examining the bolt assembly, inspecting the barrel. Maya stood silently beside him, her heart beating faster than she cared to admit. 15 years of service had taught her confidence in her abilities, but this job had pushed even her skills to their limits. Webb worked in silence for 20 minutes, completely disassembling and reassembling the weapon twice. Other mechanics and technicians gathered around to watch, curious about the rifle that had been declared unrepairable. Maya noticed several of them whispering among themselves, probably wondering if she had actually managed to fix the impossible. Finally, Webb set the rifle down and turned to face Maya. His expression was unreadable, giving no hint of his verdict. The maintenance bay fell silent except for the distant hum of ventilation fans and the occasional sound of someone shifting their weight. Maya realized she was holding her breath. That's when Webb noticed Maya's work gloves. They were black tactical gloves with reinforced fingers and palms, standard issue for maintenance personnel. But on the back of each glove, barely visible unless you looked closely, was a small embroidered emblem. It showed a skull wearing a beret with crossed rifles behind it and the number 777 below. It was the symbol of the Ghost Division, a special operations unit that officially didn't exist. Webb's eyes widened slightly as he recognized the emblem. The Ghost Division had been disbanded 5 years ago after a classified operation that had gone so far beyond top secret that most military personnel had never heard of it. Only a handful of soldiers had ever worn that emblem, and they had been sworn to secrecy about their service. Webb had commanded conventional forces during that time period, but he had heard whispers about the unit's capabilities. The Ghost Division had been composed of soldiers who specialized in impossible missions. They were the ones called when conventional special forces weren't enough, when the situation required skills and training that pushed beyond the limits of normal military doctrine. They had operated in complete secrecy, with no official records and no public recognition of their achievements. The unit had been dissolved when the political climate changed, and their particular skill set was no longer considered necessary. Maya noticed Webb staring at her gloves and quickly pulled them off, stuffing them into her pocket. She had worn them out of habit, forgetting that the emblem might be visible to someone who knew what to look for. The Ghost Division was part of her past, a chapter of her life that she rarely spoke about even to her closest friends in the military. Webb continued to stare at Maya with new interest. The Ghost Division soldiers had been recruited from various branches of the military based on exceptional skills rather than rank or conventional qualifications. They had been trained in techniques that most soldiers never learned, given access to resources that didn't appear on any official budget. If Maya had served with that unit, it would explain her ability to accomplish repairs that seemed impossible to everyone else. Major Sandra Hayes walked into the maintenance bay at 11:45 a.m., just as Webb was completing his inspection. She was the commanding officer for the SEAL team that owned the damaged rifle, and she had come to see whether her men would have their weapon back in time for deployment. Hayes was a compact woman with short brown hair and the kind of intense focus that came from years of dangerous operations. Hayes approached the workbench and looked at the rifle that had been declared irreparable just 24 hours earlier. It looked perfect, as if it had just come from the factory. She picked it up and examined the action, checked the sights, and tested the trigger mechanism. Everything felt smooth and precise, better than many weapons she had handled straight from the manufacturer. Webb stepped forward and spoke to Hayes in a low voice, explaining what Maya had accomplished. He described the extent of the original damage and the conventional wisdom that the rifle would need to be completely replaced. He detailed the custom work that Maya had performed, the hand-forged components, and the innovative techniques she had used to restore the weapon to full functionality. As Webb spoke, Hayes looked at Maya with growing appreciation. The Major understood better than most people what it meant to accomplish the impossible under pressure. Her SEAL teams regularly faced situations where conventional solutions weren't enough, where success required thinking beyond standard procedures and finding new ways to solve old problems. Hayes asked Maya to explain her repair process step by step. Maya walked her through each challenge she had encountered and the methods she had used to overcome them. She described the welding work on the bolt assembly, the hand forging of the firing pin, and the specialized heat treatment of the barrel. Her explanation was clear and detailed, showing both technical expertise and practical understanding of how weapons function under combat conditions. The Major asked several technical questions that would have stumped most mechanics. Maya answered each one without hesitation, demonstrating a depth of knowledge that went far beyond standard military weapons training. She explained stress points and metallurgy concepts with the confidence of someone who had spent years pushing equipment beyond its designed limits. Webb mentioned the Ghost Division emblem he had seen on Maya's gloves. Hayes's expression changed immediately, showing a mixture of surprise and respect. The Major had heard rumors about the Ghost Division during her own special operations training, though she had never met anyone who had actually served with the unit. The stories described soldiers with skills that seemed almost supernatural, people who could accomplish missions that defied conventional military thinking. Maya reluctantly confirmed her service with the Ghost Division when directly asked. She explained that her role had been as a technical specialist, responsible for maintaining and modifying equipment for operations that couldn't rely on standard military supplies. The work had taught her to find solutions using whatever resources were available, to repair and modify equipment under impossible conditions, and to never accept that something couldn't be done. The Ghost Division had operated in environments where resupply was impossible, and equipment failure meant mission failure or death. Maya had learned to rebuild engines with scavenged parts, to modify communications equipment to work in hostile electronic environments, and to repair weapons that had been damaged beyond what anyone thought was possible. Her service with the unit had lasted 3 years before it was disbanded, and those 3 years had taught her skills that no conventional military training could provide. Hayes asked Maya to demonstrate the rifle's functionality. They moved to an indoor firing range adjacent to the maintenance bay. Maya loaded the weapon with test ammunition and fired several rounds at various distances. The rifle performed flawlessly, with accuracy that exceeded factory specifications. The custom modifications Maya had made actually improved the weapon's performance rather than simply restoring it to original condition. Webb observed the demonstration with professional interest. He had seen many weapons repairs during his career, but never anything quite like this. The rifle that had been written off as scrap metal 24 hours earlier was now performing better than when it had first left the factory. Maya's work represented the kind of problem-solving ability that the military desperately needed but rarely found. The testing continued for another hour. Maya fired the weapon at different rates, tested it with various types of ammunition, and subjected it to stress tests that would reveal any weaknesses in her repair work. Every test confirmed that the rifle was not only functional but superior to its original specifications. Her modifications had actually strengthened the weapon while maintaining all of its intended capabilities. Hayes was impressed enough to ask Maya about her current assignment and whether she would be interested in working directly with special operations units. The Major explained that her SEAL teams regularly encountered equipment challenges that required exactly the kind of innovative thinking Maya had demonstrated. Standard military procurement and maintenance procedures often couldn't keep pace with the demands of special operations missions. Maya considered the offer carefully. Her current position in the maintenance bay was comfortable and predictable, but it didn't challenge her skills the way her Ghost Division service had. Working with special operations units would mean returning to the kind of high-pressure, high-stakes environment where her unique abilities could make a real difference. It would also mean taking on responsibilities that went far beyond standard equipment maintenance. Webb supported Hayes' suggestion, noting that Maya's skills were being underutilized in her current position. He observed that someone with her capabilities should be working on the military's most challenging technical problems rather than routine maintenance tasks. The lieutenant colonel indicated that he would support any request for Maya's transfer to Special Operations Support if she was interested in the assignment. By 3:20 p.m., Maya had made her decision. She accepted Hayes' offer to work directly with Special Operations units, providing technical support and equipment modification services for missions that pushed beyond standard military capabilities. The assignment would mean leaving the predictable routine of the maintenance bay for the uncertain demands of Special Operations Support, but it also meant returning to the kind of work that had defined her Ghost Division service. The damaged rifle incident had become a turning point in Maya's military career. What had started as a routine repair job had evolved into an opportunity to return to the specialized work she had trained for during her Ghost Division years. Her willingness to attempt the impossible repair had demonstrated skills that were too valuable to waste on routine maintenance tasks. Hayes arranged for Maya's transfer to be processed immediately. Within a week, she would be working directly with SEAL teams, providing the kind of technical support that could make the difference between mission success and failure. Her Ghost Division training would finally be put to full use again, helping special operations units overcome the technical challenges that came with their impossible missions. As Maya packed up her personal toolkit that evening, she reflected on the day's events. A simple rifle repair had led to recognition of abilities she had thought were no longer needed by the military. The Ghost Division emblem on her gloves had been a reminder of skills she had tried to keep in the past, but now those skills would define her future once again. The rifle that everyone said couldn't be repaired was being delivered to Petty Officer Mitchell the following morning, ready for whatever mission awaited his SEAL team. Maya had proven once again that impossible was just another word for a problem that hadn't met the right solution yet. Her Ghost Division training had taught her that lesson years ago, and today had reminded her that some lessons never become obsolete.